Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Quest for Camelot. If you are a 90s kid, maybe you remember this animated movie. The thing that I remembered most about it was the two-headed dragon that would argue with itself. Recently I was scrolling through the Nintendo Switch online games and I happened to find Quest for Camelot, and I thought to myself, I think I own this game on the Game Boy. Sure enough, I did, and I never had played it before, so I decided to finally give it a shot on the NSO because it has the benefits of having like a rewind feature. I think I never used it for this one, but it did have the ability to make save states, which I definitely abused in this game. As you start this game, there's a big exposition dump about that tells you about like the first 10 minutes of what happens in the movie. Basically, the main character's name is Kaylee, and Kaylee's father is killed by this evil guy named Ruber while Lionel was trying to protect King Arthur. And so Ruber gets exiled and he's all grumpy about it, and then 10 years later passes, and then Ruber comes back and kidnaps Kaylee's mother, and now he's off to go steal Excalibur and slay King Arthur, and it's up to Kaylee to save the day. All of that information is dumped before any gameplay is allowed. It's kind of funny because as you are playing throughout this game, they will show you these pixelized Game Boy Color scenes of the actual movie. I am nostalgic about this unique aesthetic. I'm not saying it looks good, I'm just nostalgic. I would describe this game as a poor man's Legend of Zelda. It is a top-down action-adventure RPG. It is not open world like a Legend of Zelda game would be. Rather, it's more chapter-based, but within each chapter, they do have open world-ish sections. The controls are not very good. Kaylee moves rather slow. I actually found that she moves faster when she's moving diagonally than adjacent. You quickly get access to a sword, and the sword has a very short range. And so with the wonky hitboxes of this game, you're going to have to get your timing just right in order to take down the enemies. Enemies have a decent amount of hit points, especially some of the endgame bosses, and so you will have to learn how to repeatedly strike the enemy over and over again. For the majority of the game, until I unlocked some additional powers, typically what I would do is I would hit an enemy and then run backwards a little bit and then hit the enemy again, run backwards a little bit, so then they don't have time to retaliate. Eventually I learned once you hit an enemy, you kind of bounce back naturally, and so that kind of gave me almost like a rhythm in order to strike the enemy. Hit them, bounce back, wait for the enemy to walk a little closer to me, and then hit them again, bounce back. Eventually you do unlock different sword techniques from the blacksmith, maybe like 2 or 3 of them. One of them is like the dash move that Link gets. I think it's with the Pegasus boots, where he kind of like runs forward pointing his sword out, and once I unlocked that technique, I pretty much relied on that for the rest of the game. One cool thing that I will say about this game that makes it a little more interesting and gives you some more incentive to defeat the enemies is your sword itself can actually level up after you defeat a certain amount of enemies. Then it does gain strength. I think that they could have tied in the sword techniques with this sword level up. There's no indication of when your sword is going to level up or how close it is to leveling up, but eventually after defeating a certain amount of enemies, you'll get a pop-up that says, hey, your sword leveled up, and eventually some of these weaker enemies will go down with one sword swing rather than like 5 or 6 of them. You do acquire other items in your adventure. Usually most of these items are only used for one chapter, and then you don't really have any reason to utilize them afterwards. Like, you do get a hook shot, but it doesn't attack enemies or it doesn't launch Kaylee anywhere. Basically, there's like 2 or 3 different points in the game where you use the hook shot to access like the top of a wall. Same thing for a shovel. Like, you'll unlock a shovel that allows you to dig for turnips in order to feed a horse and ride a horse, but this is only for like one chapter, and then you might use the shovel maybe like 2 more times after that, but that's it. You do unlock like a dragon scale, which is kind of like a roc's feather in Legend of Zelda, which allows you to kind of like leap a gap. However, it is not an accurate tile-based movement system, and so trying to measure where your jump is going to take you takes some practice. And like I mentioned earlier, the hitboxes are pretty wonky. And so you will needlessly fall to your death for very frustrating reasons when trying to use this item. And that's why I mentioned a little bit earlier that I really would save scum in this game, because actually one of the items is the item that allows you to even save in the first place. And this costs 30 gold in order to save. So they're actually like charging you to save the game. So I just didn't use any of that item, and I just saved using the NSO system. This was also very helpful when doing those platforming challenges that I mentioned, or when you would encounter some really difficult bosses that just seemed to take forever to take down. Even though my sword was powered up to a pretty strong degree, some of these enemies are just absolute HP tanks, and so you're just swinging at them over and over again, whereas if they hit you, then it could potentially take like 3 or 4 hearts off of you. And so I could imagine this being very difficult if you did not abuse that save scumming that NSO offers. You also get access to a compass, and the compass reveals a very terrible two-dimensional map for you to kind of go off of. It basically just tells you the location of enemies and where items are that you can acquire, but other than that, like trying to read how these rooms connect to each other is very difficult. And I will say at this point, items kind of work like in Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, the original one, not the remastered obviously, but you can basically attach the sword and then another item to your A and B buttons, and this includes the compass as well. And so you have to go into your pause menu, equip the compass, open up the compass, try to decipher the map, close the map, and then you try to go about your business. So it's very tedious trying to navigate through this game. There are certain moments in this game that are very obscure, and I would have no idea where to go or what to do if I wasn't following a guide. Initially, I was just trying to play through blind, but I soon realized that a walkthrough would absolutely be necessary, because in order to progress in this game, sometimes you have to go to certain locations that aren't even revealed on the compass, or you're supposed to perform certain tasks that you had no idea that they needed to be done. For the majority of the game, you will just be playing as Kaylee all up by herself. You do frequently talk to Merlin in between chapters, and he'll just kind of try to update you on what's going on in the story. You do encounter certain enemies from the movie, like you'll encounter that one guy who's blind, that blind swordsman that your dad helped train, or the two-headed dragon, or Bladebeak, the bird that was turned into a weapon partially. The gameplay sometimes does get mixed, like sometimes you're riding in a sled down a hill and you have to avoid the trees, or sometimes it's more like a shooter section where you're flying up in the sky and shooting projectiles at enemies. There's one longer section where you're doing that puzzle where you have to move the boulders around, but if you get stuck in the corner, then you have to restart. If you do happen to collect all of the items in the chapter, you will get a parchment piece, and there are 8 chapters in the game, so if you get all 8 parchment pieces, you basically get an alternative ending to the game. I didn't care enough to go for the parchment pieces, but I just playing naturally, I did acquire maybe like 4 or 5 of them. The game was frustrating to navigate as it was without trying to collect all of the items, so I just didn't worry about that. The music is pretty terrible and repetitive. It's very simple. It's not something that I would recommend listening to over and over again as you are playing through this game. This is a silent game as you listen to a podcast or watch a TV show type of game. Honestly, I don't know anyone who would play through this entire game unless they were feeling nostalgic. Maybe they had this game as a child, or they were nostalgic about the movie, or maybe you're like me and you thought it would be a hoot to make a video about. I mean, if you're scrolling through the NSO games, there's like 3 Zelda games right next to it that are just so much better than this one. It's not unplayable if you're following a walkthrough, and there's something to take away from this. I don't know if it's a lot, but there's something here. But yeah, I would probably give this game a 2 out of 5, and I feel that that's being pretty generous actually. It took me about 4 hours to beat, maybe a little bit longer, but the in-game timer said about 3 hours and 45 minutes, but like I mentioned earlier, I was save scumming, and I don't think it really keeps track of that time. It's just kind of weird that this game, out of all of the Game Boy Color games, this one was added to the NSO compared to like so many other first-party Nintendo games. But it at least reminded me that I own this physical Game Boy game, and I probably should play through it to know what it's all about. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Quest for Camelot, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!